So unless you've been living under a rock, at this point you have probably heard of this whole Liver King fiasco. The guy was so adamant about everyone believing he's natural, he may as well have like tattooed it across his face. But as with many things on the internet, it was too good to be true. And it seems like Liver King was using a little bit more than just $11,000? What the fuck? This guy's a human pharmacy. Like legit, it goes Pfizer, Moderna, Liver King's bathroom cabinet. Also, I'm sorry, but in light of this new information, this is now the biggest self-own of all time.
Do you think if I was on steroids, I would have these fucking appendages down here, these legs?
Have legs?
Do you see how fucking little my fucking legs are?
Anyway, the topic of fake naturals is one that I am no stranger to. In fact, I did a few relatively large videos about this back in like 2015. And the reason behind this is because unlike a lot of other crap that goes on in the fitness industry, it kind of does like directly affect me in some ways. And I think the same could be said for a lot of you watching. Whether it be buying the products these guys promote, like supplements or fucking duck eggs, or trying to emulate the training styles of some of these guys because you think if I work out like them, I might end up looking like them, or just exacerbating the already massive problem that is body dysmorphia in the fitness industry because people like you and I end up comparing ourselves to obviously unrealistic standards. Now, before I actually get into the main points of this video, I do want to kind of give an example of how I first was introduced, unfortunately, to this problem. So back when I was 19 and I first started working out seriously back in university, there was this one guy at my gym and he had a phenomenal physique. Now, he was a far cry from like legit bodybuilders, you know, guys like Arnold who were like 6'2", 235 pounds on stage. This guy was like 6 feet 195 on stage. Yes, stage, because he actually did compete in natural bodybuilding shows, obviously placing first. And I looked up to this guy a lot. I essentially made him in my mind like the ideal, like, you know, hashtag fitness goals. For me, that was him. The problem is eventually I realized that, at least allegedly, that was not the case. It was kind of bullshit because he had a guy, his training partner, and so to put it bluntly, that guy kind of had a big mouth. And so yeah, this was obviously somewhat disappointing because I had spent the better part of my university like career looking up to this guy, trying to train like him. Hell, I'll admit, tried to dress similarly to him because again, yeah, I kind of looked up to the guy. But that being said, as bad as this was, it's still not that terrible because the overall reach, the overall access that this guy had, it didn't really extend beyond that of like the gym doors. This was before TikTok, Instagram, really social media was very much in its infancy because yes, I am that old. This is all the way back in like 2010. Now things are, well, they're very different. With potential access to millions of fans and viewers, many of them being very young, dumb, impressionable teenagers, this is a much bigger problem. This video is sponsored by Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is a fast and inexpensive service that provides health blood tests you can do from the privacy of your own home. There are a multitude of things you can test for, such as hormone levels, micronutrients, cholesterol, even certain STDs, all in the privacy of your own home. This way, if, God forbid, something comes back with concerning results, you will have a much better idea of what you may want to look into a bit more, maybe some lifestyle changes you may want to incorporate, and most importantly, what you may want to speak to your doctor about in the near future. And they gave me a promo code. So right now, you guys can get 25% off your entire order using code VitruvianPhysique. So whether it's because there is something you are concerned about, or you just want to get a better idea of what's happening in your own body, check out Let's Get Checked using the link in the description box below. So I think at this point, most of you have seen Derek's video on Liver King and what he was allegedly taking in 2021 in terms of performance-enhancing drugs or PEDs. However, since then, he has come out with a sort of like confession or apology video that honestly, in some ways, it just doesn't make any sense and only brings up more questions, at least in my opinion.
Yes, this is true. I've continued on with 0.6 cc's of testosterone per week, roughly 120 milligrams of testosterone a week.
So apparently this physique was maintained on 125 milligrams of testosterone per week. For those of you guys that don't know, that is a relatively standard dosage for TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, which would give you a perfectly normal and healthy testosterone level. Nothing about this physique screams normal and average testosterone, like at all.
I don't take any other steroids like nandrolone or winstrol, but I have tried them in the past without success.
Okay, so he talks about using nandrolone, or DECA as it's sometimes referred to as, and winstrol. Two, relatively powerful, I think, legit anabolic steroids, but he didn't, but he discontinued their use because he didn't have success, as he put it. The two things that confuse me is, number one, why didn't you have success, considering you are using decent dosages of legit real anabolic steroids, unless by lack of success he means the side effects were too much for him to handle, in which case I guess that makes sense. And the second thing which confuses me is, if he was using all these compounds, this PED cocktail of crap, back in 2021 when he looked like this, and now fast forward a year later when he looks pretty much, in my opinion, relatively similar, but supposedly now he's only exclusively using clinician doctor monitored TRT or, and growth hormone therapy. It just doesn't make sense to me, because your physique hasn't really regressed or changed in any way. This is like you a year ago using Captain America Super Soldier Serum to get superpowers, and then fast forward a year later, you still have those same superpowers, but you're saying you're only taking, I don't know, friggin' Flintstones chewable vitamins. It doesn't make sense to me. Also, in a recent podcast, he mentioned that he's going to be going natural going forward, essentially going cold turkey.
To answer your question, yes.
Okay.
You would go natty.
Yes.
So are you going natty? That's it?
Yes.
And my concern with this is twofold. Number one is, I don't really believe you. And number two, if he were to do that, I think he would have a very bad result. It is very difficult for you to use not just TRT, but legit anabolic steroids, especially into your 40s, and then overnight go completely cold turkey without you ending up feeling and probably looking like dog shit. Again, all the more reason why, akin to what I just mentioned, I don't really believe he's going to do this. But then again, who the hell is ever going to really know? Unless this guy's dumb enough to, yet again, slide into the DMs of bodybuilding coaches for steroid advice, we're never really gonna know, will we? But the problem is, Liver King, unfortunately, is not alone in this club. He just happens to be, I guess, the most egregious example, because he spent so much time just shitting on steroids and claiming to be as natural as a high school girls volleyball team. Especially looking at some of these fitness influencers, there are some examples of supposedly natural bodybuilders where we learned that that is actually maybe not the case anymore. A popular but controversial example would be Jeff Side. This is actually someone who I mentioned way back in 2015 in my original video on this topic. And if you guys remember back then, I actually said that, yeah, maybe he could have achieved this physique naturally. The physique is phenomenal, but it is not beyond the realm of what I believe to be naturally attainable. Well, the problem is that since then, another popular fitness YouTuber, Brandon Harding, has allegedly said that
two influencers who are fake natties.
Okay, I think we should clarify. Not the obvious one.
No.
Just name two.
Jeff Side.
Yeah.
He literally bought roids from the gym I used to work at.
Okay.
Continuing on the theme of former Gymshark athletes, there are actually two guys who did blow up in terms of social media based on their supposedly natural physiques. And both of these guys actually came out a few years later to admit that this actually wasn't the case. The two I am referring to are Dylan McKenna and Quinn Vital. I remember both of these guys had stupidly good physiques, crazy amounts of muscle, phenomenal strength levels, and all of this was only compounded and made even more impressive by the fact that they achieved all of this before they were even old enough to legally drink. But lo and behold, unfortunately, that was not the case because they actually had used PEDs, at least to some extent, as early as 16. They actually both came out a few years after their initial rise to fame with kind of like admission videos where they talked about all this.
What I want to do is explain why I claim natural when I was not making any excuses at all. The first time that I had ever used anything was a junior in high school.
My first ever PED cycle I took, it was Halodrol or Halodrol, whatever it was, that was going into my junior year.
They were very honest, they were trying to be as transparent as possible, and I really respect and appreciate that, which is a big reason why I don't actually bear any ill will towards either of these guys, especially because also they were very young. Like, if we held people to a very high standard of ethics and morality when they were 17, the world would be a much more harsh place. Also, both of these guys came out of their own free will and talked about this stuff openly. This is a far cry from the 45-year-old man, the 45-year-old millionaire who only came out and confessed to this stuff after he had already been outed in front of 5 million people on the internet. But that being said, I did still want to use them as examples because I think they're very indicative of kind of like a problem which does exist on the grand scale in the fitness industry. Because I remember watching these guys, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a certain sense of jealousy and even like disappointment in my own physique by comparison. Little did I know that we weren't even technically in the same sport. When it comes to bodybuilding and enhanced bodybuilding, look, I appreciate and respect both of them, actually, which might, surprise some of you, because I understand that both of them do still require a very advanced amount of hard work, dedication, patience, work ethic, all of that good stuff, blah, blah, blah. The only problem is when one starts to secretly kind of like slide into the other for the purposes of fame or money or fucking internet clout. So at this point, this is where things get a little bit more complicated because there are actually other versions out there of fake natties besides the standard that you guys probably think of. Another version would be an individual who claims to be not taking anything at the time and in fact are not lying, but the problem is this isn't the case for their past. See, the problem is the use of anabolic steroids has been shown to give you certain benefits, certain advantages, which can actually persist even afterwards, in some cases years afterwards, after you have come off entirely. There are a few reasons for this, but a big one that I personally want to mention is this kind of phenomena where the use of anabolic steroids has been shown to increase the concentration or the number of myonuclei within muscle cells. If you guys remember back to like grade 11 biology, remember the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Well, also the nucleus is sort of like the brain of the cell. Its main function is to, number one, control cellular activity for actually, that individual cell, as well as to actually store DNA. Anyway, back to steroids. The thing is, they can actually increase the number or the concentration of myonuclei within the muscle cells themselves, and this, from a hypertrophy standpoint, it's kind of a beneficial adaptation, and it is one that could persist for a long time, years after you have completely come off everything and essentially gone cold turkey. And this is just one potential long-term benefit to anabolic steroids. There are other stuff like epigenetic modifications. I read about this one study where they said that there are potential genome markers like within your DNA, which could be activated or inactivated, allowing you to, down the road, years later, you'll be able to retain or rebuild muscle to a greater amount or at a greater speed. This is sort of similar to the concept of muscle memory, where if someone, works out and then they stop for a long time because they get sick, they quit, they choose a new hobby or whatever, if they get back into training years down the road, they will have sort of like a muscle memory, allowing them to rebuild that muscle faster than they would otherwise if they're just a complete newbie starting for the first time. This is sort of like a similar concept to that, except the memory in this case comes from the use of anabolic steroids. Now, are you going to retain 100% of the adaptations, the strength, the muscle, all of that good stuff that you had when you were blasting all these compounds and in the middle middle of your cycle? Probably not. But you're never probably going to go back down to where you were when you initially started. If this is you natural, this is you kind of like blasting X, Y, and Z, maybe you coming off cold turkey after taking these compounds, assuming you still do things properly in terms of training, nutrition, blah, 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 you might end up kind of like around here. If this is like a version 1.0, kind of like a natural version of you, this is 2.0 on cycle, maybe you'll be like somewhere around, I don't know, 1.3, 1.5, something like that. Still a significant advantage over your old, former natural self or other people out there if you are in a competitive field or even just on social media. Okay, Igor, you've been bitching for like 20 minutes now about all this bad stuff. Are you so pessimistic? Is there anything we can do? Well, luckily, yes, we can. And there are four pieces of advice that I have to you guys out there as individuals navigating the social media fitness world that is unfortunately to some extent rampant with fake natties. Number one, I recommend, frankly, you need to be more skeptical. And the only people who unfortunately I think should be more embarrassed than Liver King himself is the luckily few, people who actually defended him. I believe this is attainable naturally. You just don't work hard enough. Did you know that people 70 years ago, because of their more ancestral diets, would have double the testosterone? If you take that into consideration, this is totally achievable and blah, blah, blah. Are you fucking kidding me? What are you, fucking 12? Is this an episode of Arthur where everybody is just like a perfect, morally ethical bunny?
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
But number two, and this is kind of the opposite side of the spectrum, don't be a rampant pessimist. Don't be a complete and total cynic. I see some people kind of really jumping to the other side of this spectrum, this range, where anybody with a physique that's even like 3% impressive must be on steroids. I see this a lot on like Reddit, where people will post physiques that are like not even that impressive at all, and then people will be sitting there analyzing like, gee, is this 5'9", 160-pound physique attainable naturally? And when I read this, I'm like, are you shitting me? Are we looking at the same photo? This guy has a physique which looks like it could maybe bench press body weight. He looks like me after 8 months of training when I was 14 years old, and you're sitting here analyzing it like, gee, that ab muscle's a little too protruding. I don't know if this is attainable naturally. If there are people who are overly gullible, believing that Liver King and like The Rock are natural, the flip side of this coin would be these guys. Don't be the guy who thinks that anybody like 5 pounds bigger than you must be on steroids, but at the same time, don't be like the gullible little child who thinks that all the 18-year-olds out there on TikTok or Instagram deadlifting 700 pounds are natural. Like, oh gee, I guess they just have incredible genetics. And there's 4 of them, and they all just hang out and like work out together. All 4 of them have 1 in a billion genetics, and they just happen to be friends. Grow up. Number 3 is I advise that you follow and listen to people who give advice that is actually based on science and like logic, as opposed to mostly based on personal anecdotes. Because just because someone is large and like jacked and looks good doesn't mean they necessarily know what they are talking about. Because for every jacked gym bro out there using SARMs they bought on the internet, there is some skinnier guy who happens to know more about fitness than you and I put together times 10. And number 4, the final and probably the most important piece of advice I want to end this video on. I've said this before and I'll say it again. You need to stop all comparisons from a physique standpoint. Stop comparing person A to person B or person B to person C or persons A, B, C, D, everyone to yourself. Stop all that shit for 2 main reasons. Number 1, because like I said in this video, they might be taking something and just lying about it, and you probably will never know, in which case, again, a comparison between you two is just stupid and pointless. And number 2, even if they're not taking anything, even if they really are natural, some of these guys have genetics that are so good that comparing to yourself, someone with more average genetics, they may as well be on gear. They may as well be on like their body's own natural production of steroids that you don't have access to. Whether it be their just natural response to training, whether it be their body's natural or hormone profile, whether it be their body's natural insertions in terms of where the muscles actually connect and insert on the bone, some of which can be infinitely more, aesthetic than someone who doesn't have that aesthetic insertions. All of this crap may be equally as out of reach for you as using gear. Actually, even more so, because you could just cross over and start using stuff, but you'll never be able to change your actual genetic blueprint. You'll never be able to change your DNA. Either way, guys, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this long-winded video, but again, on my channel, what else is new? Sorry I've been away for a little while. I actually got sick twice in December. I know, lucky me. Thanks, Canada. But I'm excited for the new year, and I guess I'll talk to you then in the distant future of 2023, which is at this point like 48 hours away. See you then.